Incidents, I've only got 15 minutes of your time, so I'm going to get through this as quick as I can, but incidents are pervasive, they're non-negotiable, they're emergent, and they're unscheduled. Not the best traits for situations in a distributed system context. However, incidents are also powerful democratizing forces across your software organization. And they're also an unlimited replenishing opportunity for positive change in your org. So the purpose of this talk is to take you through 4 practices that I and the team have put into use and are working for us that are allowing us to take incidents that happen in our ecosystem and turn them into something positive for the organization. And maybe for your organization, that positive change is getting more action items in your post-incident to-do list closed out, or focus on something in the reliability space or the security space. Maybe you want to change to your system or practice. Maybe you want to get something on a roadmap. Maybe you want to get something off a roadmap. So here are the 4 pieces of homework. 1 is map your system capabilities. Okay, so this is my deeply imperfect system diagram of 24 microservices. We might look at these and say, okay, here's a bunch of microservices. Materially, the approach that we're finding we're getting some success with is this idea of grouping microservices by what we call capabilities, which are effectively a representation of how users use our microservices. So for my 24 component diagram, we split these into create new user and user account management. So what that means in practice is that if green app 19 is non-responsive, that puts us in a position where we're able to say something a bit more meaningful to the wider organization, like we cannot create new users, but existing users are unaffected. Or if red app 20 is non-responsive, we can say, hey, existing users cannot access their accounts, but the creation of new users is unaffected. Or maybe it's both, and we say, hey, it's extra bad. We can neither create new users, nor can existing users access their accounts. The thinking behind this is a challenge on the problematic unintentional difficulties that microservices have introduced. I had a slide in this that I deleted that was entitled "Microservices are the worst," but I was concerned the conference would turn on me. But materially, there's a couple of problems, and obviously I'm sharing these insights as a practitioner exclusively in incident management. One of them is, it's almost impossible for an individual user to use one microservice. So the idea or the conversation around, hey, the portal's down, and to have maybe an engineering team say, actually the portal is fine, it's the portal API. It's terrific news to someone who cares, but in a practical sense, customers still can't access their accounts. Also, as I'm sure anyone who's been on call can tell you and can attest to, the component that's making the noise is not necessarily the component that is at fault, and I use that in inverted commas. Also, you'll know if you've ever been on call that the component that's making noise or signaling distress might not necessarily be the fastest path to restoration. And also, I would love to live in a world where incidents and microservices have a beautiful one-to-one relationship. But in practical terms, not all incidents are, restricted to a single microservice, and it's also emergent. So on the flip side, this idea of capabilities are fundamentally a superset of your microservices. They are abstractions, but they're deliberate abstractions that are labeled in a way the rest of your organization can interact with. They're not mutually exclusive as a worldview, so microservices is how we've built something, whereas capabilities is a reflection of how it's being used. Essentially, capabilities give us a language that the rest of the org can use and work with. So benefits are shared language without compromising. So it's meaningful and it's portable. When I say portable, what I mean is your status updates can be cut and pasted without being translated, which is meaningful. And the second thing is it does organize yourself around your user rather than around your architecture. Okay, homework 2, bring your org in. A lot has been said about this, so I'll keep this one reasonably concise. Incidents are not just for engineering. While not every incident is relevant to every single team in your org, no user-facing incident is an engineering-only concern. A user-facing incident that's relevant is relevant if you have teams in your organization maybe that are interested in user acquisition or user support or user lifecycle. If these concepts are relevant to other teams, then a user-facing incident is relevant to that team. The organizing principle we use is we include based on relevance, not based on necessity. And what I mean by that is you're included whether you have an action item or not. You're included not if the answer is, are we needed on this? Yes, or do you need me for this? Because efficiency is not our primary objective in bringing other parts of the org and not just engineering into incidents. The benefits of bringing your org in include, but are not limited to, obviously a richer incident response. Your organization will surprise you with value adds that you had not anticipated. It's a very good thing. In a more practical sense, it is more democratic and effective communication distribution. So the more departments or functions that have access to the core of your incident, the fewer hops for communication. So, I mean, if it's good enough for networking, fewer hops is also good enough for just general communication internally. But the real benefit is it's a wider sharing of user reality, which we're going to touch on in a few moments. Homework 3, agree a shared definition of harm. Everything is a Sev1 to somebody. This is another problem that microservices and distribution systems have done to organizations in our industry, which is this idea that you can always find a stakeholder or an engineering lead or a product lead who says, ooh, this is the worst thing that can happen, as opposed to, this is the worst thing that can happen to my team in this sprint, please bro my roadmap. So we've got these 3 thoughts to share. One is think about correctness rather than availability. I would argue that systems behaving incorrectly is actually more harmful than out. 100% outage sounds scary, but I can assure you there are worse things that can happen than off. Diagnostically, off is easy. And a Sev1 is easy because everyone works for you. When you have a Sev1, your organization experiences a rare moment of consensus where everyone is on the same page and the thing must be restored. There's worse than off, and your organization will have its own context for that. But really what we're talking about is about measuring correctness rather than availability. So here are 3 random examples of things that your systems might do. Like invoices can be generated on time, but for the wrong amount. And that's a scenario that can happen. Pages can load with all sessions, but have last week or last month's offers. Or jobs complete without errors, but they run 6 hours late. In all 3 of those hypothetical scenarios, 0 or negligible error rate, great availability, and super response time. And yet, all 3 of these things will meet the definition of an incident in any meaningful context. User context is also something when you're defining harm that's super important. Candidly, not all minutes are equal. Percentage availability is for tourists. The day of the week matters, the time of the day matters, time zone matters. The significance of the day, if you've got any sort of commercial enterprise in your wider org, matters. And finally, adopt an objective and shared ladder of harm. You have to be ruthless and rank your components and your capabilities based on the harm that they could potentially cause in their absence. Not all components are equally important. And I just offer an observation that like a 10% degradation in one component may objectively to your org and your users be more harmful than a 100% outage of another component. So the benefits of an agreed share definition of harm are a reduction in ambiguity around severity. I don't know if anyone's been on an incident where there has been a side conversation about whether or not we're looking at a Sev2 or a Sev3. And that's a fun piece of trivia. But in a material sense, time spent debating the relative severities of an incident is time that's not being spent on restoration. It's time that's not being spent on remediation, which is bad. And of course, the other side of it is that if we can agree a severity and agree a harm, we get integrity of investment, which is good. Homework, the 4th, which is a bit abstract, is choosing consequence over intention. So I don't know whether or not anyone's had a situation before where after something's gone wrong, an engineering team offers a sentiment that sounds like, hey, listen, this was supposed to be a no-op change. This shouldn't have happened. Good. I'm glad that we did not deliberately intend to take down a system, but the reality is it's weird that we have a lot of these conversations where people say, like, we actually didn't mean to do this. Good. I don't know why you feel the need to reassure me. What else are you cooking up? But when we take the joke out of it, intention and consequence don't correlate in software. And arguably behind almost every Really significant high severity outage is a well-intentioned change somewhere in a complicated system. I mention this not just from a place of empathy, but also constructively. This is really, really important. Because after an incident happens, organizations discuss and they review and they share narratives. And quite quickly you find yourself in a conversation where someone's saying something like, look, I know it was very bad, but Gary's team had 2 people who were out, and we also had this conference to attend, and we had 2 new starters to train. All of that's true, and all of that is relevant in the context of the team. But let's say hypothetically 6,000 users could not log into their account for a day and a half. That lack of access for a day and a half is just as true regardless of what the context in your organization is. So we need to develop language where we're able to simultaneously say, hey, tell me about the context that happened in your team that saw us have this problem, and objectively what was the consequence for the user. And the reason being, not to put too fine a point on it, that we don't want to be in a situation where the incidents we learn from are only the incidents where we have malice of intent, which is a very, very narrow subset of what you see. So the benefits of choosing consequence over intention: 1 is every incident is a value opportunity and not just those without a narrative. And 2, I guess philosophically, user empathy is always a good thing. Let me just check how we're doing for time. We're on time, good. So your homework is think about mapping your system capabilities. Seriously consider bringing your org into your incidents, whether they're necessary or not. 3 is find and establish and agree a shared definition of harm. And 4 is be mindful around choosing consequence over intention. So a final thought to pull all this together is the question that is bandied about a lot in the industry is, what is the value of reliability? And that's a very complicated question, frequently asked, and whether it's in the context of platform engineering or SRE or even security and beyond. But perhaps the question we should be asking is, like, what is the value of incidents? Because the value of incidents is objective, it's real. It definitely happened on the 14th of a month. X thousand users were unable to do something. And this is significant and material because it is in those terms that the rest of your organization defines value. There are teams within your org that are preoccupied with making sure that users can do stuff, that we get new users. So potentially the question of, like, what is the value of incidents is a more powerful one that we can ask when we are having the inevitable prioritization conversations. Those are my thoughts for you. I'll see you in production.